Hello everyone. For this video I figured I'd do a brief history as to what a book peddler was and is, and put up pictures of book peddlers of the past as I talk about them. It's the name of my business, so I thought it would be appropriate and fitting. References as to the information following will be found in the links below. If you're new to the channel, I hope you like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. So anyhow, I'd like to start by reading a poem a friend of mine wrote. One of my best friends, Justin Sigworth, what I and many others around here called him Big Sig or Siggy, wrote it. And I got to know Sig well the last few years of his life. He was definitely a larger-than-life character. He probably stood at about 6'4", weighed right around 400 pounds. He was a hilarious guy who always had command of a room he walked into and an infectious laugh. So we had a lot of great times together. He always encouraged me throughout my business venture, and times get tough, he'd always lighten up my mood. He watched the shop a handful of times when I had business to attend to. It always made me a little nervous because you never knew what he'd say, and you'd always wonder if prices were half off the store when he was working. But great guy. One time he helped me at one of these book auctions. It was like 3 hours away in Pennsylvania, and on the drive I realized he was supposed to have a job interview to go to that morning. He said, "It's all good, man, I don't want to work there anyways, I'd rather do this." So I miss my friend very much. And when I was going to do this short video on history of book peddling, I'd forgotten they wrote a poem about my business. I remember him calling me up saying he had a video promotion idea for the shop, and he had written the poem to go with it. And so he came over that night and we drank a few beers, kicked ideas back and forth. Probably not too much got accomplished. But I was cleaning up my house a bit, and in the one room I came across his poem and a couple other papers that he wrote. And I was supposed to see Sig the day before he died. And I called him up saying I couldn't make it. I was busy with work, and of course I've regretted that ever since. But so anyhow, I would like to start off this video by reading the poem he wrote. And it goes like this. Through cartons of books that have long disappeared, through mountains of dust that have bested many years, one man has the tenacity to go through them all. His name is the book peddler, the one you should call. He'll greet you with a smile, of this I am sure. Come on down to Smithville and walk through his door. Books and antiques of seasons gone by, written by men who have long since died. You'll quickly find out why the peddler's your guy. Come on down to 5266 Highway 41 and you'll see why. That's what Big Sig wrote for the shop. God bless Big Sig. Hope he's found peace. So, well, I want to start by saying, when I was trying to come up with ideas as to what to name my shop, it didn't take long when I struck upon the name The Book Peddler. One of my favorite movies is called A Bronx Tale, which takes place in the 50s. And in that movie, there's a guy named Phil the Peddler. And he would walk his horse with wagon attached down the streets of the Bronx, and he would sell vegetables. Well, my name's Phil, and I was going to be peddling books, so I thought The Book Peddler would be fitting. And for me, there's always been an allure towards figures like this that were street vendors of different sorts. They had and still do have a gypsy type of spirit, a strong, individualistic, independent aura that seemingly encapsulates their character. Each one has their own style of conducting business. They're great salesmen. They can be flamboyant and expressive, or quieter and tempered. Some a bit edgy, others more so pleasant. Some very social, some not so much. Either way you cut it, they're their own person who brings their wares out into the public, spends time packing, unloading, and packing up again, hours upon end, moving from venue to venue to make ends meet. For some it's a hobby, for others it's full-time work. Many establish relationships with their customers, have them in mind when they're buying new items to bring to them. If you are new to their setup, some may even eye you a bit suspiciously, trying to figure out who you are and what you're about. Are you going to waste my time, or are we going to buy something today? Are you a liar, a thief, an opportunist? Are you trying to butter me up to swindle a deal? There is much dickering involved, hemming and hawing at prices. Sometimes loud vocal confrontations ensue. Slanders and insults are thrown and pride damaged. It's social entertainment at its finest. Besides the street vendor or peddler, I had a very nostalgic view of a book peddler, one that traveled to rural areas of the countryside to bring people books to read, making the rounds slowly, town to town, bringing affordable material to people of lesser means. They were probably a source of entertainment, a break in the norm for the locals. It was an event for everyone to see a horse-drawn buggy bogged down with bundles of books. I always thought how great that would be. A simple life, a poor one maybe, but richer than most in many ways. To be in the fresh air with the rhythmic clod of your horse's hooves and the creaking of the cart's wheels turning under a heavy load, stirring dust and jolting in and out of ruts. To park your burdens for a bit and give your horse a rest as you cast a fishing line into a river when time afforded it, or to sit back and prop yourself under a tree and get a bit of reading in yourself. To be able to sleep under the stars to a fire at night in peace and quiet. I figured you'd be alone with your mind a lot, think and ponder many things, almost partially taking on the lifestyle of a monk or hermit-like existence, a rambling man, bound to no one. Of course, this is more so a romantic take, but probably not altogether incorrect depending on the circumstances and setting. I'm sure it was pressing sometimes, getting to the next town to earn money to eat and move to the next. Sometimes you probably went to sleep on an empty stomach. The appreciation of those stars didn't matter very much because they weren't food. Repairs were probably constantly made on your cart or wagon for busted bearings, spindles, replacing boards, or fixing the tongue. You had to make sure your horse was fed and watered and taken care of. Your clothes would probably need to be sewed from time to time. Sometimes you might not get a bath for days on end. Every situation was different, but one thing for certain is that all that travel would begin to wear down your equipment and yourself, and constant maintenance was probably always a part of the life. But you knew the next community over looked forward to your arrival. You would bring them news and joy, entertainment, conversation. The kids would paw at you for books and a million questions asked before you could answer the first. Rewarding as it was probably a very difficult life as well. So, to begin on this history of book peddlers, I'll start in the 15th and 16th century. Before this, books were more so a work of art, scrolls of vellum scripted predominantly by monks in a monastery that recorded and copied older works for preservation. These were beautiful, richly colored, and it took a steady hand and long hours of attention. These were not distributed to the public, but were for the upper classes of society to study. The general public was not afforded any type of leisure, their hands constantly working and backs breaking under strenuous work. Most were famished and were just trying to survive. Most couldn't read to begin with, and it would be preferable to the ruling class. It wouldn't be preferable to the ruling class if they could anyhow. Ideas can be a dangerous thing to give to a subservient population. The book publishing industry began in the urban areas. This is where the customers existed. Everyone from lawyers, doctors, ecclesiastics, they all needed books. During the 15th and 16th century, the roles of printer, publisher, and bookseller was often combined into one operation. The works produced were often reprints of books written during earlier times or translations. In the 16th century, collecting books became popular. Private libraries among the wealthy started to take shape. Booksellers began to refine their printing of material to try and make it cheaper to afford. Towards the end of the 17th century, the industry began to grow. As the publishing industry expanded, the roles of printer, publisher, and bookseller began to naturally separate. The demand became greater, and one man could not sufficiently and adequately do all the work. Joseph Shaylor, in his book The Fascination of Books, published in 1912, states, and I quote, "By a system of association, the principal booksellers produced for themselves most of the books they sold, and in many cases they employed authors to write them. By this system of cooperative publishing, prices were fixed, discounts regulated, and all trade questions easily adjusted. The cost of producing a book was borne by this circle of publisher booksellers, who were called partners, and the books thus produced were usually of popular character." So more booksellers and bookstores began to emerge. Most publishers and booksellers began by firstly apprenticing under those who were well established in the trade. With any trade, especially one that was on the rise, it attracted dishonest, immoral swindlers and opportunists that had no qualms over deceiving the public by publishing unauthorized versions, fabricating material to cause scandal and attention, all to make some quick money. Joseph Shaylor, again quoting from his book, The Fascination of Books, says, "The reprinting in its entirety of a successful work without the sanction of either author or publisher was a common practice. Booksellers openly sold these unauthorized editions, and the rightful owner of the works, whose property was thus unblushingly appropriated, had no redress. Fictitious title pages were not infrequently introduced by the booksellers, and were not confined to any particular class of literature, being employed alike for fiction, poetry, and even biography, often causing great scandal and annoyance." End quote. Street vendors and booksellers were often seen selling cheaper books during the 17th century. Many worked for the publishing companies. These peddlers were called color porters in Europe. Color porter was a French term meaning neck and to carry. These peddlers carried a basket of books attached with a neck strap. They sold books door to door on the street corners. Color portage is a term used to mean to peddle. In this case, the edition of publications by peddlers. Popularity of books continued to grow, and the public was becoming more enthralled and invested in books. Dutch publishers created inexpensive editions of popular works to appeal to ordinary people. According to Mathieu Lommen, in his book, The Book of Books, 500 Years of Graphic Innovation, published in 2012, quote, "Holland's trade and commerce also helped it to attain Europe's highest literacy rate, enlarging the market for political and religious pamphlets, almanacs, newspapers, songbooks, emblem books, and popular literature." End quote. So the business was clearly growing. Like the color porter of Europe during earlier centuries, peddlers were popular in the United States in the 19th century, peddling famous works of literature, Bibles, pamphlets, almanacs, and political tracts. The American School Library, established in 1839, was a traveling frontier library in the United States. One of the earliest mobile libraries in the United States was a mule-drawn wagon carrying wooden boxes of books. It was created in 1904 by the People's Free Library of Chester County, South Carolina, and served the rural areas there. The American Tract Society and the American Bible Society were religious organizations that encouraged the distribution of religious literature, particularly during the American Civil War. In a book titled Christ in the Camp, published in 1887, a chapter titled Bible and Colportage Work described how traveling peddlers supplied religious literature during the Civil War. When the war began, most publishing houses were located in the North. This opened up an opportunity for booksellers to make their way to the South and head to the camps and hospitals to distribute Bibles and other materials. Another early mobile library service was developed by Mary Lemus Titcomb, who lived from 1857 to 1932. As a librarian in Washington County, Maryland, Titcomb was concerned that the library was not reaching all the people it could in the rural areas. So the Washington County Free Library began a book wagon in 1905. Titcomb would take the library materials directly to people's homes in remote parts of the county. So book peddlers served the local communities with works of all kinds, some specified. And I have a really cool, large, heavy book crate from the American Book Company that was founded in 1890. My crate is probably from the early 20th century, and this particular company, the American Book Company, delivered school books around the country. And I still haul books around on it when I set up at different venues. This one was on the Erie Railroad. I've included pictures in the slideshow. So today, library systems still have mobile libraries to serve local communities throughout the world. They are far advanced forms now from the horse and buggy. Some are enormous buses and trailers that hold thousands of books. It is a trade that hopefully will never die. I've held events at my shop where I've had local authors and authors from surrounding areas set up at events selling their books, like modern-day book peddlers. And when I travel to flea markets or different events throughout the state, I bring books based on the setting that I think will appeal to people. If it's a local town, I bring predominantly local histories. If it's a gun show, I'll bring military books or hunting, firearm, and outdoor books. So the peddling's still alive. Some customers even that have fallen ill or have health issues come to my shop and can't anymore. Sometimes I grab a bundle of books and bring them to them just like the peddlers of old, just with a modern day car, no horse and buggy for me. But so the peddling's still well. I always thought the term book peddler had a nostalgia and wholesomeness about it. The term may be a bit antiquated in a world of rapidly advancing technology, one whose chapter will hopefully never be finished. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to this brief history of book peddlers. Below are links to information I referenced. I want to point out that the first link is a documentary I found on book peddlers operating in New York City in the 1980s, and I thought you'd enjoy this as well. And so anyhow, I hope you like and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the video, there'll be more material to come. And keep on reading, people.